Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well and having a fantastic week. Today's video is all about parrot beak health. Some of the things to look out for, some common diseases or issues that can cause beak problems, and of course how to keep your bird's beak healthy. Now I have already made a couple of videos like this on feather health and foot health, so if you haven't seen those, I'll leave them down in the description below so you can go and check them out after this video. Now a parrot's beak is super important because it's basically like a tool, almost like a third hand, and they use it for so many different things like object manipulation, preening, feeding, climbing and exploring. So it's so important to make sure it's kept in really great health. The beak is made up with two jaws, which is the upper maxilla and the lower mandible, and it's covered with a protein called keratin. Keratin is the same material that makes up our hair and fingernails, and it's always growing. And as it's always growing, that means the beak is always growing, which is why we need to keep it trim, but do it in natural ways. There are many different reasons why a bird's beak may grow abnormally, or there could be problems with it, which I'm going to go into in a second. But one thing I really want to stress is please do not try to trim your bird's beak at home. They do need to see a vet if you think that the beak is overgrown or misshapen in any way, because you can't just, trim it or anything like that. It can bleed, it can be really, really painful, and you need to make sure it's done properly. When you go to the vets, they'll use an instrument called a Dremel, and they'll just gently grind away at the beak and shape it in the right way. So they do need to see a vet. Another point I'll make just before we get started is a flaky looking beak is often normal. As I said, birds' beaks are always growing and they grow in layers, and birds need to naturally grind off those layers during natural activities. And in the process of getting rid of those layers, the beak sometimes looks a little bit flaky, sometimes peeling. Most of the time it's normal, sometimes it's not. If you're ever concerned, again, please contact your local avian vet. Now, one of the most common ways that birds can actually injure or damage their beak is through trauma. So sometimes if they're flying around and they crash land, especially with clipped birds, they can actually crash land and hit their beaks, which can cause some bruising, can cause some indentation in there. So that's something to be really aware of. Most of the time the beak will just grow normally after time and you'll get rid of that bruising and any kind of indentations, but it's something to be really aware of, and birds can really hurt their beaks because, as I said, they do have bones in there and then the protein on top. So just be super careful if your bird ever does crash land to give them a really thorough health check and keep an eye on them just to make sure that everything is okay. As you can see, Chip has no problems flying around all over the place today. Another common problem that can affect beak growth is vitamin A deficiency, and this, as I said, is super common in birds in captivity. Often birds aren't fed quite the right diet, it's lacking in lots of essential vitamins and minerals, but vitamin A especially can be tricky to get the right levels of. So one of the ways you can do this is to provide dark leafy green vegetables. All those really dark green vegetables are packed full of vitamin A, and so are orange vegetables and fruits as well. Things like bell peppers, papaya, mango, carrot, sweet potato, all those good stuff are really important to include in your bird's diet. And as I've said before in previous diet videos, it's not as simple as providing some pellets or seed and then maybe one or two vegetables a day. It does need to be more of a complete raw diet full of loads of different vegetables, sprouted seeds, grains and legumes. All things like that are super healthy, and you're going to get in all those natural vitamins and minerals in there, and it's going to be keeping your bird's beak in tip-top condition. So like most of these problems, vitamin A deficiency can cause abnormal beak growth. The beak can grow too long on the top, too long on the bottom upwards, and obviously it's not something you want for your bird because then they won't be able to use their beak normally, and it'll affect all of those things that birds use their beaks for, like feeding, preening and so on. Now, something that can happen at the beginning of a bird's life are congenital deformities. So when the bird is growing from a baby, sometimes if they're fed incorrectly or the temperature or humidity isn't correct, it can cause abnormalities in how the beak actually develops. One of the most common ones is scissor beak, where the top beak and the bottom beak cross over, and of course that's not going to be very good for them in terms of actually feeding and preening and doing all those natural things that birds need to use their beaks for. And this is one of the reasons why I don't recommend people to just have a go at breeding, have a go at it and see what it's like and give it a try, because it's not as simple as just getting a baby bird and just feeding it and loving it. You really have to get the levels right. Please just don't give breeding a go because you feel like it, because if things go wrong, then it's going to be very expensive for you, because your bird is going to need to see a vet if they have something like scissor beak or one of these other congenital deformities, but also you want to make sure that your babies have the best start in life. Next up is fatty liver disease, again one that causes not only problems with the beak but of course problems with the whole body as well. And poor liver function interferes with the metabolism of the amino acids, like the protein building blocks of the beak. beak. So of course that's going to cause loads of problems with how the beak develops, how it grows, and how a bird can use it as well. It often makes the beak grow in an unusual shape, or of course going overgrown as well, and then you're going to have loads of problems with how your bird uses its beak, as well as having the health issue in itself. And this is often found in very overweight birds. As the name suggests, fatty liver disease means that they're unlikely to have had a great diet. So a lot of these things, even in my feather and foot videos that I've made, a lot of these things come down to providing a really healthy and balanced diet. So if you're maybe a bit concerned about your bird's diet, or you'd like a bit more information, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to speak to you, give you some pointers. Or of course you can book a consult with David and I with our Best Behaved Birds business. We talk about diet, we do training, behaviour, all those kinds of things. So of course if you have any concerns about your birds that are more behavioural or dietary wise or just general care, please do get in touch with us, as we would love to speak to you. The next issue I want to talk about is Pbfd, or cytosine beak and feather disease. This is a serious disease and it's contagious, but it's not so common. I want you to be aware of it and not kind of freak out that I'm mentioning it. Just be really aware of all these different things that could potentially go wrong with your bird, just so you're prepared, you're fully aware of the signs to look out for, and then you'll be well educated and prepared if something was to go wrong. So as the name suggests, Pbfd does affect both the beak and the feathers, and it causes abnormal growth. It can make the beak go really, really long, really pointy, and it can even make all of the feathers fall out. So as I said, it is very serious, but you need to make sure that you are giving your bird regular health checks, and if possible going to an annual vet exam to maybe have some bloods done, just to check up on making sure that your bird's okay. And this is also something to be aware of if you're bringing a new bird home, where they've been, what situation the birds have been in, the health of the other birds that have been around your bird. Just want to give you all this information just so you're prepared. Now another sign of Pbfd, specifically in cockatoos, is their beak goes really, really shiny. Now if you know about cockatoos, you'll know that they are powdery down birds, just like the cockatiel, and their beak is often covered in the white powder that they have within their feathers because they're preening nicely. But if the feathers aren't growing properly and there is a problem with the powdery down, then their beak is going to be super shiny, and that is a telltale sign of Pbfd. In other birds, sometimes you don't see it for a while, but often, as I said, it does cause feather issues and abnormal beak growth. And finally, I just wanted to talk about overgrown beaks in general, because it's not always caused by, you know, something scary or a disease or something like that. Sometimes birds' beaks just do get a little bit overgrown, and this could be due to, as I said already, diet and things like that, but also being provided incorrect toys and perches. Now birds need to be shredding and destroying their toys, and it helps to naturally wear down their beaks. And if they're provided with rough perches and a variety of textures, they actually like to rub their beaks all over them, and that can help keep them nice and trim. Now quite often, especially with small birds, I see owners trying their very best and providing lots of toys for them, but they're quite often materials that the bird isn't able to destroy because their beak either isn't strong enough and they're being provided really hard woods that they just can't destroy and they don't want to because they're a bit lazy, or they're provided with plastic toys, and I see cages packed full of plastic toys. And whilst they look fun and they're colourful and your bird may enjoy to kind of rattle a few of them around, ultimately they're not serving a purpose which a toy should be designed for with a parrot, which is to be destroyed. As I've said before, any toy that's sort of been in your parrot's cage for some time probably either isn't the best toy, or a bird doesn't really know how to play with toys. Now I do have a video on training your bird to play with toys. If you haven't seen it already, I'll leave a card at the top and a link in the description. It could just be that your bird isn't quite sure how to play with toys. It may just need a reminder or to be trained to do so, and it is fully possible to get your bird destroying toys instead of perhaps your belongings. And of course, just getting them destroying toys using that beak and wearing it down naturally. So now I've talked about what can go wrong with your bird's beak, let's talk about how you can prevent those things and keep your bird's beak nice and healthy so that you don't have to worry about overgrown beaks or anything going wrong. So of course the first point, as I've mentioned many times and I'll continue to mention, is providing a healthy, balanced diet, primarily made up of vegetables and sprouted seeds, grains and legumes, and then you can have some extra healthy pellets, for example, like Harrison's or Tops that you can feed in the evening. They can have a bit of healthy seed too, and of course training treats are more likely to be those unhealthy seeds reserved just for training, so they have a higher treat value. But it is so important to get your bird's diet right. The next point, again, as I've already mentioned, is to have species appropriate shredding toys. For smaller birds, quite often you'll want to go for things like palm leaves, paper, cardboard, lots of easy shreddable materials. If your bird is an excessive chewer, then of course go for some of those harder materials or provide even more. But just be aware that smaller birds are generally going to need softer materials, and then bigger birds, of course, you want to be giving them really hard things to be really working for to get that beak nice and trim. The next point is to have lots of different textures with your perches. You can have sanding perches, you can have rough perches, you can have like one dowel perch. You know, some people are anti-dowel. Some of our cages, I think just one of them doesn't have a dowel perch, but generally you can have one dowel perch as long as it's not the main perch that your bird uses. For example, with our cockatiels, it's the perch that they go to just for their water, and as they're not big drinkers, they don't go there very often, but it's just another perch that we have in there. All the other perches are natural materials made of branches, and they have loads of different bobbles and knobbles, and it's all going to be really great for when they rub their beaks on. Birds often rub their beaks either to grind down their beak naturally, sometimes they'll just do it because they want to, sometimes they'll do it out of a territorial issue and a bit of aggression, but that's just something to be aware of, and also they'll do it after they've eaten their food. They'll go and wipe their beak all over their perches. So there's just a couple of reasons why a bird might wipe their beak on a perch, but if they are doing it, you want them to be doing it on a nice rough surface to get some of those layers of keratin off. Pickles has joined me for the end of the video if she fancies a cuddle. And the next point is to provide a cuttlefish bone for your bird. Now, some birds don't really know how to use them, so again you can use training to get them using the cuttlefish, but that's another way of not only getting them to wear down their beak and get them chewing, but also providing them with a calcium source as well. So it's a really useful object to have in your bird's cage, and Pickles is just mumbling in my ear, it's really funny. My next point is to provide your bird with natural foods that they can kind of wear down their beak on. For example, shelled nuts and seeds. They actually use their beaks to unshell them and really crack those nuts and seeds and get into the goodies inside. And providing your bird with those, of course in moderation, because you don't want them to be having them too often, but it does help with keeping that beak nice and trim, and of course they're having a nice treat in the process. Now, my last 2 points are don'ts. Now, the first one I've already covered, which is please don't try and trim your bird's beak at home. It does need to be done by a vet using a Dremel. However, you can train your bird using positive reinforcement to accept a nail file or an emery board, just to file away maybe a sharp tip or a bit of excess on the top. But again, if you're not confident doing this, please contact a vet. And the second don't is please don't cover your bird's beak in coconut oil. I've seen this so often. Firstly, it's pointless, it's not going to help your bird's beak. And secondly, it is potentially going to get into your bird's nostrils if you're kind of slathering it over the beak, and that's going to cause lots of problems. If your bird has a problem with its beak and it's very noticeable, get them to a vet. But as I said at the beginning of the video, most flaking and peeling is normal. It doesn't cause your bird any distress, and it's, as I said, yeah, it's normal. So don't be slathering oil all over your bird's beak. They just don't need it, and it can cause potential problems. So just be really careful with that. So that brings me to the end of the video. I hope you found it useful learning a bit more about beak health and how you can keep your bird's beak in tip-top condition. If you have any questions about beak health, about diet, anything like that, or if you have any suggestions of other videos you'd like to see or other kind of ways to keep certain body parts healthy for birds, please leave them down in the comments, as I would love to speak to you. But from me, Pickles and Shrimp and Fish, who are hanging out on David over there, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Take care and see you later.